Working conditions for railroad laborers are terrible. The country is cursed with disease and swarming with mosquitoes. And the men began to die of cholera, malaria, dysentery, fever, and smallpox. Diseases that seem to seep from the jungle without cause or cure.
We were in the densest jungle, reeking with malaria and abounding with almost every species of wild beast, noxious reptiles, and venomous insects known in the tropics.
The human cost is extraordinary. Legend has it that there is a dead man for every railroad tie between the Pacific and Atlantic coast. At least 6,000 people will die during the construction of the railroad, a number that will pale in comparison to what lay ahead. Against all odds, by 1855, there was a line across Panama, traveling ocean to ocean in just over 3 hours. It is the world's first transcontinental link, 47.5 miles long. Despite the train's popularity with passengers, nothing can move cargo like a steamship. Ambitious entrepreneurs come up with various schemes, including one to drag ships by rail across the country. In the mid-19th century, the steamship is transforming ocean travel. The world wants to move its goods quickly, and going by sea is faster than land. A canal across Panama would save huge amounts of money and time. It is a dream that will not die. The hell endured by the railroad workers makes it obvious that to build a canal, men will have to outwit nature itself. In 1878, one man claims he can do just that. He is renowned Frenchman Ferdinand de Lesseps, builder of the Suez Canal, which connects the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea through Egypt. The building of Suez had made de Lesseps famous worldwide. Jules Verne wrote that the Frenchman had the genius of will.
It was simply a case of a man who, because he did Suez, had so much prestige that whatever he thought up, everyone would follow. They thought they knew what they were doing. They thought that they would come over here, dig a lot of dirt, and in the fullness of time, there would be a hole that stretched from the Atlantic to the Pacific. The water would run through, and everyone would be happy. As a matter of fact, everything that they learned at Suez had to be forgotten before they could begin figuring out how to do Panama.
The desert of Egypt is nothing like the jungles of Panama. But de Lesseps believes he could move mountains.
Il a pensé parce qu'il avait une vision.
He thought he had a clear idea of the difficulties involved in a big project, and he told himself that he was the man for the job. He suddenly persuaded himself that it was him and not anyone else who could build the Panama Canal in the time needed.
Now, at the age of 72, de Lesseps vows to cut the world in half again. He has no formal technical background or experience in finance. What he does have is charisma.
Everyone loved de Lesseps. He was immensely energetic and charming. He was called a great engineer, but he knew nothing of engineering. He was instead a passionate promoter without the least desire for personal gain. His goals were glory for France and the good of mankind. And in 1870, he was arguably the most admired man on earth.
The Frenchman's enterprising spirit thrives in a world equally confident. Construction of the Brooklyn Bridge is underway. Scientists are uncovering fossils that prove the new theories of evolution. And the telephone is celebrating its 3rd birthday. The Suez Canal and America's Union Pacific Railroad are emblems of a world that is eager for progress, With the right tools, man can conquer nature. May 1879. In Paris, de Lesseps convenes an international scientific congress. To attract investors, he needs a consensus on his proposed Panama Canal, and he is determined to get it.
The real point was to give the appearance of international scientific approval to the plan de Lesseps had already picked. He personally issued every invitation. He had the last word on agenda, rules, and committees, and he stacked the Congress with French delegates.
The 136 delegates represent 22 countries. They debate where to build the canal, how long construction will take, and what kind of a canal it should be. They argue over alternatives to Panama. Some people, including the Americans, believe a waterway through Nicaragua would be easier to dig, but it would require a system of locks. A lock canal lifts ships up and over the land barrier with what is essentially a set of steps made of water. The canal de Lesseps wants, a sea-level canal, requires more digging in order to create a level path through land that doesn't change elevation. De Lesseps envisions a canal just like the one he built at Suez.
You need only to look at a map to see that Panama is the only place for the canal. The route is established. There is a railroad, and thriving cities border each end. There is really no issue.
The sad thing, the ironic thing, the tragic thing, was that right there in Paris was a French engineer named Gaudin de l'Épinay, who figured the whole scheme out brilliantly and made a presentation of it in 1879 at the International Canal Congress. You put a dam on the Chagres River here, you put another dam at Madden there, you get yourself a nice 85-foot artificial lake, and the boats slide across the isthmus on a water bridge.
Of those present and voting, the tally is 72-8 in favor of de Lesseps' plan. The Technical Commission tells the Frenchman that the canal will cost 840 million francs and take 8 years to build. With his characteristic eye for public appearances, de Lesseps reduces both estimates by 25%. He launches the French Canal Company by offering 800,000 shares for purchase, all before he even sets foot on the isthmus or studies a single survey of the proposed route. The initial response is disappointing, but de Lesseps is a convincing salesman. He travels the globe giving speeches, but he is certain the bulk of the money will come from his own countrymen. De Lesseps is right. The buyers are mostly French middle class, some of whom invest their entire life savings. His eldest son, Charles, decides to join his father in the Panama venture, although privately he worries.
Panama Canal is sponsored in part by Lexus, where even the pursuit is exhilarating.
The Lexus RX 300. Motor Trend Sport Utility of the Year. Fluid. Over any surface.
At the center of a great PC experience is a Pentium 2 processor.
A thought for those of you married to your job. Every once in a while, have a fling. with your wife. Royal Caribbean, like no vacation on Earth.
Dedicated, devoted, an icon of strength and innovation. There is nothing the body can't do. There is nowhere the mind won't go. Every day, challenging the limits. At Samsung, we make this challenge part of everything we do. Our advanced technology products provide strong, flexible solutions to help you give your best performance. To create, to dream, to excel. Samsung, challenge the limits.
There are some things you just can't afford to miss, like Discovery News, the only primetime science newscast on television. Discovery News, taking you beyond the obvious and into the science behind the headlines. Discovery News, understanding what happened, why it happened, and the impact it has on our lives. Discovery News. If you miss it, you miss out. Fridays at 10 Mountain, 9 Pacific. Only on the Discovery Channel.
Hi, I'm Dick.
Ojai Valley Surplus. Unique goods. Stuff you want but won't find anywhere else.
I've always wanted that.
Save money.
Save a lot of money.
Hang out. Make friends.
The nicest people work there.
It's a place to have fun.
Go wild.
It's Ojai Valley Surplus. It's a lot of stuff. Fun things.
Things you need.
Brand new.
Beautiful.
Open every day at 952 East Ojai Avenue. Come in and check it out.
Are you paying too much for term life insurance? Now, through Matrix Direct, a 35-year-old man could get $250,000 term life coverage for less than $18 a month, guaranteed for 10 years from a top insurer, Transamerica. A 42-year-old man could get $100,000 term life coverage for less than $14 a month. Call for a fast, free quote over the phone. Matrix Direct, 1-800-725-5728.
On January 1st, 1880, Ferdinand de Lesseps honors Panama with his first visit. He is here to stage the official groundbreaking ceremony. His daughter strikes the first blow. The French celebrate for days. La Grande Tranchée, the Great Trench, has begun. De Lesseps goes on tour through the country he claims was made to seduce him. His romance is based on illusion. Panama has put on its best face for de Lesseps. It is the beginning of the dry season, the only 3-month period when the 130 yearly inches of rain stop falling. Seven miles into the trip, the touring party sees the Chagres River for the first time. It appears to be a placid stream. But a day later, the river forces them to stop. Heavy rain in the mountains had caused massive flooding, and portions of the railroad bridge that crossed the Chagres are underwater. This should be a warning, but de Lesseps ignores it. The river is so violent, it would flood any canal in its path. The Chagres will have to be diverted, but no one has the slightest idea how to do it. After the waters recede, the touring party enjoys the rest of the ride without mishap. De Lesseps, inspired by sunshine and blue skies, is in high spirits.
We have in Panama 5 divisions of engineers, and everyone is convinced that we cannot fail to attain the desired end.
The last few miles into Panama City are akin to a victory lap. The canal is coming. The planned canal route follows the line of the railroad between the 2 port cities of Panama in the north and Colón in the south. 30 miles slice through virgin jungle. 17 miles run through the rugged mountains of the Continental Divide. The first phase of the canal effort involves clearing a path through the jungle so that machinery can be brought in. Only a few hundred men doggedly work their way through the undergrowth. Most are locals, black and Indian Panamanians. The razor-sharp leaves slash their skin. Poisonous plants cause terrible rashes. But the machete men slowly part the jungle, inch by laborious inch. The tangled vines, palms, trees, and grasses before them seem infinite. After 3 months of work, it begins to rain. It is as if the heavens opened up and the sky goes liquid. As suddenly as it begins, the rain stops, and the jungle turns back into a steaming hothouse. The pattern repeats relentlessly for 9 months.
If there is one thing that is unnerving and intolerable, it is to be constantly, night and day, enveloped by a warm steam.
The wet season is traditionally the time of sickness. Several cases of yellow fever are reported. Very soon, the first canal employee dies from the disease. It is a sign of things to come. The men work in constant fear of poisonous snakes. Insects buzz incessantly around them. They don't understand the mosquitoes are more than an annoyance. They are carriers of disease.
With every step, we would smash hundreds. With every hand gesture, we would scoop up a handful. And with every movement, our faces would touch swarms. We breathed them in. We swallowed them.
Eight months after groundbreaking, a strip of land is clear from Cologne to Panama City. Just large enough for the steam shovels of the day to get through. By the end of the first year, the French need more workers than the local labor pool can provide. Men come by the hundreds from the nearby West Indies, lured by the promise of a steady job and the princely sum of $1 a day. On January 20th, 1882, the digging begins in earnest. 3 divisions began to work simultaneously all along the route. At sea level, the work is done by dredges, but in the uplands, it is a laborious process of pick, shovel, and wheelbarrow. The parting of Panama is being done by hand. Back in Paris, the Canal Company quietly buys the Panama Railroad for 300 million francs. It's become obvious that the excavation will be impossible without trains to haul away the earth. Already the French company is over budget, and they still don't know what to do with the unpredictable Chagres.
The Chagres, enlarged by the rain that has just fallen, has a very imposing aspect and does not inspire the idea that it will easily let itself be contained.
A year into the project, the French finally complete definitive maps and surveys. They are in for a shock. Panama is not what they had imagined. They discover the isthmus as an engineer's nightmare, composed of layers of 17 different types of rock, an unstable combination that is bound to cause trouble. The lowest point in the mountains, the Culebra Cut, should be the most promising path to follow, but it is made of solid rock. Nestled in an unbroken chain of jagged peaks, it is also going to be the most difficult. Still, confidence flows from French engineers. In Europe, They are pioneering ideas in bridge foundations, reinforced concrete, and building construction. The latest architecture in Paris is recognized as bold and innovative. In Panama, French ingenuity is less successful. Contractors order a bewildering variety of equipment: locomotives from Belgium, railroad cars from France, and dredges from the United States. Very little of the equipment is compatible, and most of it is not suited to the terrain. Rocks and boulders are hauled off by a chaotic mix of 11 different types of railroad cars running on 6 different gauges of track. Most of the track is uneven and too light for its heavy loads. There are 49 locomotives and more than 3,000 rail cars available, but most of them frequently go unused. The French begin to have trouble keeping a labor force together. At first, Jamaicans streamed into Panama, but many quit to go home and spend their earnings. The French are homesick, bored, and miserable. Among them is a young painter named Paul Gauguin.
Here I have to move the earth around from 5:30 in the morning until 6 at night, under the tropical sun and the daily rain. At night, I'm eaten alive by mosquitoes.
As if the disorganization, the rain, and the disease aren't enough, a severe earthquake hits the isthmus in September of 1882. Damage is extensive. The earthquake causes massive landslides that must be cleared. But the French steam shovels had been designed to operate in the soft sand of Suez. They cannot handle the heavy rock and mud of Panama. Back in Paris, the greatest concern about the quake is the impact it might have on investors. With perfect confidence, de Lesseps vows it is the last earthquake Panama will ever see.
Panama Canal is sponsored in part by the Principal Financial Group. Plan ahead, get ahead.
Good financial decisions require expertise. Life needs flexibility. Success demands leadership. If there's something you want to achieve, the Principal has one word of advice. Plan a financial strategy for yourself or your business. Start today. 1-888-506-PLAN. Plan ahead, get ahead. The Principal Financial Group.
Hey, Danny, I just talked to Mama. She told me that she would love it if we would all come home.
She cooking?
I'm gonna bring my bad kids, too.
Introducing Sprint Unlimited Weekends. All Saturday, all Sunday, no limits.
I'm there. Mama, you said that you wanted all of us to come home, so...
I didn't say come home. I said call home.
Call anyone, anywhere, all weekend long for just $25 a month. Call 1-800-PIN-DROP and Sprint ahead.
And I'm not cooking.
No one knows more about the safety of pain relievers than doctors and hospitals. And the pain reliever they choose most? Tylenol. In fact, for pain relief, doctors recommend Tylenol more than all other brands combined. For over 20 years, Tylenol has been the first choice of doctors and hospitals. It's simply the most trusted combination of strength and safety in pain relief today. Tylenol, the pain reliever hospitals use most.
Please move away from the car. Please move away from the car. Please approach the car. What kind of pants are those?
Slates.
Do they make seat covers? Slate's Pants by Levi Strauss & Company. Time to get dressed.
Thanks for coming, boys. First, I want you to move the hay over there.
Then split and stack that firewood. And paint that barn. And when you're done, I'll give you this 6-pack of Coors beer.
Let me get this straight. The hay, the wood, and the barn, for that?
Yep.
So what's the catch?
There's only one Mile High taste. Coors, the original.
To see a bit of what makes Dodge Intrepid fast, let's cut to the quick. It has a sparkling 200 horsepower gem of an aluminum engine, grippy independent suspension, crisp steering, and a highly functional driving space. Intrepid demonstrates a lot of powerful thinking, no matter how you slice it. Well equipped, $20,495.
You're watching the Discovery Channel. Explore your world. Go behind the scenes into the FBI's ultra-secret crime lab as actual agents explain the techniques and tricks used to capture some of the most elusive killers ever. The FBI Files. Coming up next on the Discovery Channel. Explore your world.
After 2 years on the job, the major contractor quits. De Lesseps knows he needs someone to take over and take charge. Jules Danglars comes to the isthmus determined to clean house. Danglars declares the final amount of earth and rock to be removed will amount to 120 million cubic meters, 1/3 more than had been estimated at the Paris Congress. The difference is equal to what had been required for the entire Suez Canal. De Lesseps makes no change to Panama's projected completion date or cost.
The highest elevation at Suez was 50 feet above sea level. Here it was 330 feet, and that translated into millions and millions of cubic yards of dirt to be removed. At Suez, you had mostly sand. Here you had rock, and what was worse, mud. The mud was terrible here. The more you dug out, the more slid in.
By now, the workforce has swelled to 10,000, and the French are digging hard on both coasts. As they move into the interior, the land is riddled with faults and volcanic rock, making excavation much more difficult. The equipment is not up to the task. Wooden dump cars are used to haul away the dirt. Their carrying capacity is only 5 to 8 cubic yards, or 2 to 3 barrels full. In the rainy season, the men must often unload them by hand because the mud sticks to the planks. The problems of mud and machinery are intensified by insidious natural enemies. The same diseases that had plagued thousands of railroad workers are attacking canal laborers.
I am coming back from the dead, and I have gotten up from my straw mattress to write you. While I was in Cologne, I contracted a disease poisoned by the swampy miasmas of the canal.
"60 people die of disease in 1881. Most of them are killed by malaria. It is the most common disease on the isthmus. Malaria, from the Italian meaning bad air, is believed to emanate mysteriously from the human marshes. The assumption seems reasonable, since the cause of disease is not yet known.
At every pig's blow, pestilent fumes would be released, and the breeze would carry them to Cologne or to Panama, where they would invade all open windows.
The sick are plagued by chills, followed by high fever and burning thirst. Quinine is not always an effective cure due to inconsistent doses. Too much can cause vomiting or deafness. A few scientists suggest that mosquitoes might carry disease, but their ideas are rejected. The miasma theory remains widespread. All the while, beautiful gardens surround the hospital. Hundreds of pottery dishes filled with water ring the trees to protect them from ants. Inside the hospital itself, the beds rest in pans of water for the same reason. But standing water is a perfect breeding ground for mosquitoes. Many patients are reinfected before they have a chance to get well. Yellow fever is also thought to be airborne, and there is no known cure. In Panama, those stricken with the disease stand less than a 50% chance of survival. Fits of shivering are followed by savage headaches. After days of suffering, the unlucky ones begin to turn yellow. Soon after, terminal stages set in.
After 2 weeks, the fever hadn't left. Horrible nightmares tormented me. Screams followed me everywhere.
In 1882, 125 canal workers die. 420 follow the next year. In 1884, the number jumps to 1,200. For years, the French remain adamant in their denial of a disease problem. De Lesseps simply claims there are no epidemics in Panama. His Director General echoes the sentiment.
I intend to show the world that only the drunk and the dissipated will die here of yellow fever.
3 months after he arrives, Danglars brings his wife and children to live in Panama. The French began building a house especially for his family. Meanwhile, Danglars must step up efforts to replace the men who are dying. The French can use every man they can find. The digging is slow, but the real problem is removing the debris. A key piece of equipment is the transporter, a belt and roller mechanism designed to carry the dirt away. But it is rarely functioning. Even when it does work, the machine doesn't move spoil far enough away. Much of the dirt falls back into the trench and has to be dug out again. The toll of the climate on tools and machinery is devastating. Anything made of iron or steel rusts. Everything else grows mold. The ineffective machinery often gives way to pick and shovel. Despite discouraging reports, de Lesseps remains optimistic. Meanwhile, Director General Jules Danglars is preparing to move his family into their new house when his daughter complains of feeling ill. A few days later, she dies of yellow fever. Within a month, his only son is dead. Danglars writes to Charles de Lesseps.
Madame Danglars, who knows that she is for me the only source of affection in this world, controls herself with courage, but she is deeply shaken.
The world outside Panama sees only progress. Buildings are going up everywhere. Hundreds of acres of jungle are chopped back to make room for more construction. In 1884, canal laborers are dying of disease at a rate of 200 a month. Then, news of the death toll begins to leak. In France, too many parents are being told of the deaths of their sons. Still, a ceaseless parade of Frenchmen come to work in Panama. They enter as soldiers to battle. For them, the canal is still a glorious cause. On the front lines of construction, the going is only getting tougher. The harder the French work, the more hopeless the task appears. As the rainy season begins, conditions in the treacherous Galabra cut worsen. Mudslides are constant. In 3 months of 1884, 48 inches of water drowned the French in a relentless sea of mud. One estimate figures that at the present rate of progress, it will take 24 years to finish the canal. On New Year's Eve, 1884, Jules Danglars' wife dies of yellow fever. Danglars never moves into the family house. 9 months after the death of his wife, the grief-stricken Director General goes home to France, alone.
With Transamerica Investments and Insurance Products, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to plan for your financial future. The people in the pyramid working for you.
The 1999 Lexus ES 300. More powerful than ever, without losing so much as an ounce of civility.
For a Pentium 2 processor?
At Transamerica, we have insurance products and investments for retirement that'll help you plan for your next career. The people in the pyramid working for you.
Imagine a brand new species of spider yet to be named, but whose name will it be? The results are in. The waiting is over. If you entered the Name That Spider contest on Discovery.com, watch Wild Discovery Tarantulas and Their Venomous Relations Sunday and find out if you're one of 3 runners-up or the lucky winner. A night of creepy crawlers and winners on Wild Discovery, Sunday at 8 Eastern and Pacific on the Discovery Channel.
TCI Media Services wants to send you home for the holidays. Our grand prize winner and guests can visit family and friends or have them visit you. You could win 2 round-trip airfares within the continental United States, deluxe hotel accommodations, and rental car. Make this a very special holiday season and register to win the Home for the Holidays sweepstakes. Brought to you by TCI Cable and these fine sponsors.
Enter to win at George Thompson's Your Friend in the Diamond Business or Ojai Village Pharmacy.
All over America, people are discovering a package of important free information concerning hearing loss. Call the toll-free number right now, and you'll receive a valuable video and informative booklet that show you how hearing aids may help you hear better.
I learned a lot of important things about hearing, including ways to help myself. You know, it's sad going through life not hearing what your family's saying, particularly when you might learn how to help yourself with this free 15-minute video.
Call the toll-free number for your free video information kit today.
By the middle of 1885, barely 1/10 of the canal is finished. Costs have been vastly underestimated. 1885 is also the deadliest year for canal workers. More die from yellow fever and malaria than in all previous years combined.
I saw so many people die that I wouldn't be able to list them all. My memory sees, in a confused mass, most of those pale and convulsing faces whose eyelids I often had the sad duty to close.
In this disastrous year, the Canal Company has almost run out of funds. De Lesseps turns to the public and asks them for more money. They buy bonds totaling 350 million francs.
The last thing people want to give up is their illusions. They'll give up their money before they'll give up their illusions. Nobody wanted to say, we lost this one. The Lesseps didn't want to admit it. The government didn't want to admit it. The French shareholders didn't want to admit it. Nobody wanted to come to the conclusion that, hey, this won't work.
In the spring of 1886, de Lesseps runs out of money again. By now, the French people are losing faith. De Lesseps runs a lottery, but less than half the shares are sold. Parliament and the press begin to criticize the Canal effort. Then come whispers that money is disappearing mysteriously. By 1887, costs are soaring even higher, and work is in more serious disarray. Some contractors are quitting, others are preparing lawsuits. Money is also being drained by inflated salaries and expensive housing in Panama. More rumors surface that much of the French Canal Company's money has been misappropriated or stolen. With his company's bank account quickly shrinking, a desperate de Lesseps gives in to the plan he had most vehemently opposed, a temporary lock canal. He enlists Gustave Eiffel, builder of the famous tower in Paris, to design the lock gates. The dramatic gesture briefly sways public opinion in de Lesseps' favor. By the end of 1888, the French are seeing glimmers of progress for the first time, but once again, de Lesseps runs out of money. The French Canal Company tries one last lottery offering. It is a total failure. By 1889, there are no more bonds to sell and no more money to raise. With only 11 miles of the canal complete, the unthinkable happens. The French company declares bankruptcy. The French people, who have stood by de Lesseps for a decade, are outraged. A formal investigation is launched. Accusations of fraud and widespread bribery send shockwaves through France. 20%, over 100 members of the French Parliament are implicated in bribe-taking, along with many members of the press. The Prime Minister is forced to resign.
The scandal of Panama did indeed have a profound impact on France's history, precisely because it was not a financial scandal, but a political one.
In the aftermath, Charles and Ferdinand de Lesseps are indicted for fraud, maladministration, and political bribery. Charles must present a defense alone. At 85, Ferdinand de Lesseps is too old and sick to give testimony. It is nearly 13 years since the first French pick hit soil in Panama. In the Paris Court of Appeals, Charles de Lesseps is accused of intentionally wasting his stockholders' money. The trial reveals astronomical bribes and kickbacks to bankers, politicians, and newspapers. Anyone who had opposed the French Canal had been paid off. 800,000 shareholders, mostly from the low and middle income range, lose every franc of their investment.
The French reacted strongly. Those who invested reacted strongly. Today still, I know people to whom you cannot mention de Lesseps. They say, my family lost everything in Panama.
So devastated are some investors, they commit suicide.
I invested everything I had in Panama. The canal failed, and I'm going down with it.
The scandal of the French Canal Company is the biggest financial fiasco of the 19th century. Ferdinand and Charles are found guilty as charged, sentenced to 5 years in jail and fined 3,000 francs. The ailing Ferdinand de Lesseps never serves his sentence. The old man lives out his final years in a state of bewilderment. He dies in 1894, leaving behind a country betrayed. Despite the waste and the deception, despite the crushing disappointment, the world still cannot bring itself to condemn de Lesseps outright.
It was his indomitable ardor, his irresistible desire to endow the world with another shortcut between oceans, his ambition to add one more ray of glory to the engineering genius of his country that drew him into the impossible Panama undertaking.
The cost in human life during the 9 years of French construction was 22,000 people. De Lesseps is dead, but his dream lingers on. A token force of workers remains in Panama to retain building rights. In reality, the French are simply waiting to unload the Canal Company. In 1902, they find a buyer, Teddy Roosevelt, newly inaugurated President of the United States. He is certain Americans can achieve what the French could not. The U.S. is brash, confident, and gathering momentum as a global power.
A canal was greatly desired by the world at large. Once the idea became feasible, it was a matter of who was going to do it, when, and how.
The French leave behind only traces of their heroic attempt, but their experience will haunt the lives of their successors. For Theodore Roosevelt, picking up the pieces of the canal effort is easier said than done. He is going to need some help. It will appear unexpectedly in the form of an ambitious and cunning Frenchman. The plan will require secret meetings, double dealing, even conspiracy. It will take many more lives, many more years, and a revolution in technology before the dream of a canal will be realized.
Panama Canal is sponsored in part by the new Dodge. It's about change.
Since Dodge Caravan's easy-out roller seats have wheels that pop down, reconfiguring the interior is an exercise in convenience. Not an exercise in exercise. Why don't all the other guys make it this easy? Go configure. Now get $750 cash allowance on Caravan, $1,000 on Grand Caravan.
Hello. Who is this?
What are you wearing?
Just a shirt and a pair of pants.
Oh, that's exciting.
Hello. Who is this?
What are you wearing?
A shirt and a pair of slates.
Gabardine or herringbone?
Well, they're
sort of a drapey tweed.
Slade's Pants by Levi Strauss & Company. Time to get dressed.
8,000 mutual funds. And everybody's looking for a winner. But chasing the latest hot fund won't get you anywhere. To pick a mutual fund, find out how they pick their stocks. At Janus, they pick stocks one at a time. They investigate companies like nobody else and invest in the most promising ones. That's how you get there. Janus Mutual Funds.
That's my best friend, Jake. A few years back, his brother died of AIDS. It was the hardest time of his life. Mine too. That's why when Jake asked me to volunteer in a kitchen that prepares food for homebound people with AIDS, I knew I could make a contribution. At first, I did it to make Jake feel good. But after volunteering a year now, I do it to make me feel good. You can help. To find out more about the food service provider near you, call the number on your screen.
In prehistoric times, horses were about the size of your average household dog. Yeah, I'm afraid rodeos weren't very exciting back then.
Looking for horseback, not fiction? Hey, get the real deal. Watch The Ultimate Guide Horses. It's an up-close look that proves fact is more amazing than fiction.
And that's why horseshoes don't come with heels. However, one archaeologist has uncovered evidence of horse sandals in ancient Rome.
Hey, be the ultimate expert. Watch The Ultimate Guide Horses. Premiering Monday at 10 Mountain, 9 Pacific on the Discovery Channel.
At the turn of the century, President Teddy Roosevelt is eager to celebrate America's grand entrance onto the world stage. His strategy includes a Panama Canal. Times are changing rapidly. The Wright brothers are about to make the first successful powered flight. Skyscrapers have begun to dominate the landscapes of Chicago and New York, made possible by a revolutionary improvement in steel. The new alloy is changing the very nature of how men build and their power to control the world around them. The Spanish-American War had convinced Teddy Roosevelt that the U.S. must dominate the oceans. The war's naval battles had been decisive elements in America's victory. For sea power, Roosevelt needs a Panama Canal.
To Theodore Roosevelt and his aggressiveness, his martial spirit, the Panama Canal was extremely significant. He thought it was the most important work of his administration.
In 1902, the president plans to buy the remnants of the French Canal Company, but he will also need permission to dig. Panama at the time is a province of Colombia, and it is Colombia which must grant the U.S. the rights to build the canal. The president offers the Colombians $10 million, but they want more. Roosevelt is livid.
I do not think that the Bogota jackrabbit should be allowed to permanently bar one of the future highways of civilization.
The president would dearly love to cut Colombia out of the deal. Closely watching the situation is an opportunistic Frenchman. Philippe Bunau-Varilla had been the last Director General of the French Canal effort.
Bunau-Varilla was one of the great hero rogues of the imperialist era. He was a bouncy little guy with what Teddy Roosevelt called duelist's eyes and a tremendous toughness.
Bunau-Varilla had invested heavily in the French Canal Company. He needs it sold if he is to get his money out. Roosevelt would be delighted if Panama became independent from Colombia. The new nation could then make its own deal with America for a canal. It is just what Panamanian nationalists have been waiting for, a chance to revolt. At the Waldorf Hotel in New York City, Bunau-Varilla runs into Dr. Manuel Amador, leader of Panama's revolutionaries. He claims the meeting is coincidence.
He said, "What are you doing here, doctor? We've taken up a collection We have $600,000. We're going to buy a gunboat to fight the Colombians. Wonderful, said Bonifacio, but why not use the United States Navy?
Bonifacio makes the next strategic move. He arranges to pay Roosevelt a call. The Frenchman seeks the president's assurance that he will not intervene in a Panamanian revolt. And he gets it. Roosevelt effectively gives the nod to Panama's uprising by not opposing it, and by sending American warships to patrol offshore. The U.S. intimidation keeps the Colombians at bay. Less than 48 hours after it began, the bloodless revolution is over, and President Roosevelt acknowledges the new Republic of Panama. Bonifacio flaunts his influence by appointing himself Panama's ambassador to the United States. He immediately begins negotiating with the Secretary of State for the agreement allowing the U.S. to build the Panama Canal.
He was so interested in getting the money, getting the $40 million that the U.S. had agreed to pay for a bunch of rotting equipment for works that mostly were never used, that he thought of everything the United States could possibly want in a treaty and then put in some more. As, for example, a clause that gave the United States perpetual sovereignty until the sun goes out, till the stars stop shining, over 500 square miles of Panama's territory.
Meanwhile, Dr. Manuel Amador, now president of Panama, arrives in Washington, thinking he is going to make a deal for the canal. He is dismayed to find out that the treaty is already done. When the treaty is signed, the French Canal Company receives $40 million, most of which disappears into the pockets of Bonifacio. The country of Panama gets $10 million. The Colombians get nothing. Many Americans are appalled, but Roosevelt dismisses his critics and pronounces it the duty of the United States to support nationalist uprisings. Roosevelt wins his isthmus, and Bonifacio takes credit for avenging the honor of France.
I had fulfilled my mission, the mission I had taken on myself. I had safeguarded the work of French genius. I had served France.
With government funding and the roar of new technology behind them, the Americans arrive in Panama ready to make the dirt fly. Carpenters, mechanics, file clerks, and laborers come by steamer to Panama, eager to be in at the start of the great canal enterprise. Roosevelt appoints a 7-man commission to run the new canal operation. He names John Wallace chief engineer. The Americans find the jungle as ruthless as the French had. It is quickly reclaiming its hold on the abandoned canal site. Panama City and Cologne are cesspools.
No one that I know came to the Isthmus for pleasure. Lodging accommodations to an American were most uncomfortable, the food poor, the streets narrow, dirty, and perfumed at frequent intervals with the odors of foul-smelling sewers.
Add to the squalor the smothering climate. The same intense heat and relentless rain that tormented the French make everyday life a trial.
The tropical rain poured down in torrents during the wet season, so that reaching our quarters we were miserable sights to behold. Grease-spattered, rain-drenched, and dog-tired, we would laugh and joke at each other's plight, and think of home in the good old USA.
And the shadow of malaria and yellow fever still looms over the isthmus.
The fever lashed good and plenty. In those days, you watch men shake. Gentlemen, you'd think they would shake to pieces.
Medical breakthroughs had recently uncovered the true causes of both deadly diseases. Not poisonous swamp fumes, as was thought, but the Aedes and Anopheles mosquitoes. Equipped with this knowledge, Army Doctor William Gorgas had led the successful effort to eliminate yellow fever in Cuba during the Spanish-American War. Now, Roosevelt names him Chief Sanitary Officer in Panama, with a mandate to do it again. Gorgas knows that he will need to wage mosquito warfare on every square inch of the Canal Zone. There isn't a country on Earth closer to mosquito paradise. Steady temperatures and standing water encourage constant breeding. In spite of the medical evidence, Canal authorities ridicule the idea that mosquitoes carry disease. Requests for larvicides, sulfur, and oil are ignored. As a result, Gorgas can do little to sanitize the isthmus. He is fighting a losing battle. Along with the fear of disease, discontent spreads among the workforce. Conditions in Panama are terrible, and they're not getting any better.
We are compelled to sleep in an old shed, 6 to a room. The meals would sicken a dog. Tell the boys at home to stay there, even if they get no more than $1 a day.
Chief Engineer John Wallace inherits a chaotic mess of French equipment, much of it in disrepair. He triples the number of steam shovels in the Culebra Cut, but they are idle 7 hours out of every 10. There is no system for disposing of the enormous amount of waste. 1 year after arriving, the Americans had excavated less soil than the French had done in 1 month.
The thing that overtook them was scale. No one had ever planned anything on this scale before to do what they wanted to do, move ships from ocean to ocean.
So frustrating is the work on the isthmus, the spirits of the workforce rapidly begin to sink. Only one element is needed to escalate the discontent to panic. It comes during the last months of 1904, a dramatic outbreak of yellow fever. In 4 months, 47 people die.
Yellow fever completely scared the living what's-its out of everybody there, and Wallace, who, according to some reports, already had 2 caskets there for him and his wife. He was so afraid of yellow fever. He up and left.
Chief Engineer Wallace quits on June 28, 1905. Roosevelt plucks his new chief engineer from the railroad industry. The Great Northern, which crossed the rugged peaks of the Rocky Mountains, was an engineering triumph. The man who conquered the Rockies had the perfect experience for the challenge of the canal. John Stevens accepts the job of chief engineer, but only on certain conditions.
I'm to have a free hand. I'm not to be hampered or handicapped by anyone high or low. And I am to stay on the isthmus only until success has been assured.
He came into Panama, took one look around and said there are 3 diseases: yellow fever, malaria, and cold feet. And the worst is cold feet. And he set to work.
Stevens takes on a project in complete disarray. His first course of action is to stop the digging and assess the dismal conditions. He declares sanitation the top priority. Stevens gives William Gorgas a free hand. In September 1905, Gorgas and his fumigation brigade commence an all-out battle against the mosquito. They begin with the city of Panama, moving house to house. They do the same in Cologne.
I am frequently ordered out of my room in the early dawn so that the sanitary department can fill it with burning sulfur. The man in the next room swore and said he wished the French were running things now so that a fellow could take yellow fever in peace if he wanted to.
Acre by acre, the men drain swamps, slash vegetation, and kill mosquito larvae by oiling the pools and streams that cannot be emptied. At the height of the campaign, 4,500 men are screening, oiling, ditching, and fumigating 10 hours a day, 7 days a week. Yellow fever had terrorized the isthmus. No one remembered Panama without it. But in 18 months, Gorgas wipes out the deadly disease. In 1906, the last case of yellow fever is registered on the isthmus.
Panama Canal is sponsored in part by Royal Caribbean International, like no vacation on Earth.
A thought for those of you married to your job. Every once in a while, have a fling with your wife. Royal Caribbean, like no vacation on Earth.
The 1999 Lexus ES 300. Its new, more powerful engine will have an effect on you, even if you're not driving.
Took the 53 to the 1, didn't you?
Every year in Avon, Colorado, there's Bob Fest, a celebration of Bobdom, held at a bridge named Bob. Now, how do you capture an event of such magnitude? With the Pentax IQ Zoom 160. It's compact and simple, like the name Bob. It's got autofocus, auto flash, switches to panoramic, and it can zoom to 160 millimeters, one of the longest power zooms of any 35 millimeter compact camera. It's the Pentax IQ Zoom 160.
But you can call it Bob.
Aren't your pictures worth a Pentax?
We humans have a funny thing about work. We actually like it. And while we get much more out of work than a paycheck, the paycheck feels pretty good too. That's why there's Provident Income Protection. If you're ever sick or hurt and can't work, the money keeps coming in, along with any help you need so you can get back to work. If you really want to call it that. Provident.
You liked it, so tomorrow the Discovery Channel's got more of it. We're gonna get your adrenaline pumping. We're gonna get you a ticket, take you through the turnstile, strap you into a seat, and send you on the ride of your life. So fly higher, spin faster, cruise farther, and scream louder than ever before. Thrill seekers, this one's just for you. Wild Rides 2, tomorrow at 10 Mountain 9 Pacific, only on the Discovery Channel. Explore your world.
What a great ride.
Can your radio do this? Only one radio gives you such big stereo sound, yet it's small enough to fit almost anywhere. The incredible Wave Radio from Bose. Only the Wave Radio can fill any room in your house with sound that popular science called a sonic marvel. The Bose Wave Radio. It'll make a big difference in the way you listen to music. Call today to learn about our free shipping offer, 30-day in-home trial, and 6-month payment plan.
TCI Media Services wants to send you home for the holidays. Our grand prize winner and guests can visit family and friends or have them visit you. You could win 2 round-trip airfares within the continental United States, deluxe hotel accommodations, and rental car. Make this a very special holiday season and register to win the Home for the Holidays sweepstakes. Brought to you by TCI Cable and these fine sponsors.
Enter to win at Bob Kildee's Shop for Men or George Thompson's Your Friend in the Diamond Business.
John Stevens calls for entire communities to be created in the Canal Zone. Houses, mess halls, fire stations, schools, and clubhouses are constructed. Both port cities are cleaned up and paved. 6 months later, the Americans have transformed the isthmus into a fit place to live. Next, Stevens tackles the dilemma that is fundamental to the success or failure of the canal.
His most remarkable contribution was that he decided that the most important problem facing anyone attempting to dig the canal was what you did with the spoil. That is the earth, the dirt that you took. What did you do with it?
Stevens carefully plans an innovative track layout for disposing of the immense amounts of excavated soil. He devises a railroad system that becomes the backbone of all canal operations. Within a year, crews have completely rebuilt the line with heavier rails that can withstand the enormous loads. The cornerstone of success is double tracking. Trains can run virtually non-stop in both directions, the entire width of the isthmus. More efficient trains mean harder working steam shovels.
They were moving constantly, 160 a day through the Culebra Cut, taking spoil out while it was being done. There was as many as 67 of these steam shovels at work during the height of the Culebra Cut excavation.
The Americans would ultimately dig out more than 230 million cubic yards of earth from the bed of the canal. In the 9-mile stretch of the Culebra Cut, the dense, unstable passage through the mountains, cars full of rock and soil run a continuous circuit on the main line of the railroad. At the dumping ground, a 3-ton steel plow pulled by a winch unloads the entire 20-car train in a single sweep, all in about 10 minutes. The unloader does alone what used to take 300 men. The simple act of turning the Panama Railroad into a conveyor belt is a turning point for the entire effort. Stevens is working up to 18 hours a day. He places orders for 100 steam shovels, 4,000 dump cars, and 28 dirt spreaders. The size of the labor force triples.
Panama Canal is sponsored in part by Intel, makers of the amazing Pentium 2 processor.
For years, Intel technicians have been making PCs smarter. Now they face their greatest challenge ever.
Hey, no one messes with my brain until I get sprinkles. Suckers.
Now anyone can have all the brain power they want. Just look for a PC with an Intel processor inside.
By eliminating covalence inhibitors, we create triple-dense carbohydrates and thus the so-called super donut. Ooh. Many of you mock my interest in the pastry sciences.
What do you have inside?
Just a reminder that with options like traction control, anti-lock brakes, and all-wheel drive, Dodge Caravan is good on ice, and snow, and slush, and rain, and mud, and dirt, and... Now get up to $1,000 cash allowance on Dodge Caravan.
Good financial decisions require expertise. Life needs flexibility. Success demands leadership. If there's something you want to achieve, the principal has one word of advice. Plan a financial strategy for yourself or your business. Start today. 1-888-506-PLAN. Plan ahead, get ahead. The Principal Financial Group.
Go behind the scenes into the FBI's ultra-secret crime lab as actual agents explain the techniques and tricks used to capture some of the most elusive killers ever. The FBI Files, coming up next on the Discovery Channel. Explore your world.
You loved it. So tomorrow, the Discovery Channel's got more of it. We're going to get your adrenaline pumping. We're going to get you a ticket, take you through the turnstile, strap you into a seat, and send you on the ride of your life. So fly higher, spin faster, cruise farther, and scream louder than ever before. Thrill seekers, this one's just for you. Wild Rides 2, tomorrow at 10 Mountain 9 Pacific, only on the Discovery Channel. Explore your world.
What a great ride.
A new kind of steam shovel, the Bucyrus, is the biggest earth mover ever built. It can dig up to 8 tons of earth in a single scoop, filling a railroad car with dirt every few minutes. Canal engineers become inspired to create more new time-saving devices. Before the invention of the track shifter, moving railroad track required gangs of men and hours of back-breaking work.
There were usually Jamaicans bossing the gang doing it, sometimes a white man, and they would chant. And they'd all have the bar down and have the shoulder up against it. And a piece of one of them was something la-di-da-di-da, and when I say Panama, Colan, go down, and everybody would shove with the bar and move the piece of track maybe a foot. And they'd all pick up then, get all lined up again, go through the whole thing all over again. It would take them forever to move a piece of track.
By the summer of 1905, the canal zone is healthy, and work on the canal is making progress. There's just one hitch. 26 years after the canal was begun, the United States still doesn't know what kind of canal it is building, sea level or lock. But it's a decision that can no longer be put off. Stevens believes firmly in a lock canal. The time and cost of its construction will be half of a sea level canal, he insists. He convinces Roosevelt, but Congress is a tougher sell. Stevens is forced to leave the isthmus to lobby in Washington. He spends 2 months helping key senators prepare their arguments. His efforts are rewarded. When a vote is taken on June 21st, 1906, the Senate approves a lock canal. Before the U.S. can proceed, an old enemy must be confronted, the powerful Chagres River, which lay in the path of any canal, must be dammed. Men begin clearing an area of jungle for what will become the largest artificial lake in the world. Nearly every foot of the way must be cut by hand. The Panama Canal would be a bridge of water, consisting of lakes, locks, and sea approaches. Ships entering from the Pacific would pass through a set of locks, which would lift the ship 54 feet to the level of a small lake. The ship would then pass through another lock, which would lift the ship to the level of a much larger lake. Gatun Lake would be the highest point of the canal, formed by damming the Chagres River. The canal would wind through Culebra Cut for 9 miles and then proceed in open water 23 miles further. On the Atlantic side, there would be a flight of 3 locks, which would lower the ship back to sea level. Engineers complete the new plans just in time for a grand event. President Roosevelt is coming to visit the canal zone. Many consider the first foreign trip by a sitting president to be daring and dangerous. But Roosevelt knows he needs to make a statement. The Panama Canal will succeed.
Even after Stevens had started to sort things out, the public was still crying, "Make the dirt fly," and the pressure was intense. It was also very intense on Theodore Roosevelt. That's one reason he came down in 1906 and sat in that big Bucyrus, because it was quite clear to him that his administration was in trouble if the Panama Canal failed, as the French had.
Roosevelt visits in November, the height of the rainy season. He says he wants to see conditions at their worst And he is not disappointed. The second day of his visit, 3 inches of rain fall in less than 2 hours. Despite the downpour, Roosevelt is characteristically enthusiastic and manages to raise the morale of the labor force to a new high.
This is one of the great works of the world. It is a greater work than you yourselves at the moment realize. I go back a better American, a prouder American, because of what I have seen the pick of American manhood doing here on the Isthmus.
The work crews may be impressed with Roosevelt's words, but not Stevens. In January of 1907, he quits without explanation. To Stevens, digging the canal was merely a task to be done.
The honor which is continually being held up as an incentive for being connected with this work appeals to me but slightly. To me, the canal is only a big ditch.
Roosevelt is furious.
Instead of having men there who will quit when they are tired, I shall send men who won't quit until I am tired.
He appoints a successor within days. This time, it is a man who will follow orders, Colonel George Goethals of the United States Army. Stevens is a tough act to follow.
I have never seen so much affection displayed for any one man, and if I carry on so as to build up a similar feeling, it will be the proudest work of my life.
Goethals sets out to win the respect of his workforce. He opens his office to any employee with a complaint every Sunday morning.
Among the finest things Colonel Goethals did, and certainly the greatest to improve labor relations, was the establishment of his Sunday court, as it was then known. The lowest laborer could go in on Sunday morning and present any complaint.
Goethals knows how to instill loyalty and promote efficiency. He runs the Isthmus like a military camp. Life and work are strictly controlled.
The man who built the Panama Canal, modestly, of course, I say that was my grandfather, was a man trained in the art of war. And he won his greatest fame and did his greatest work in the cause of peace. In fact, what you might say is that he commanded the Army of Panama, and that's the way he put it.
It was a plan. This is the fine finger of the military being felt in that they wanted it to be totally self-sufficient. Food, clothes, shoes, tobacco, canned goods were all in a commissary. And they had a big plant on the Atlantic side where they baked bread and they bottled milk. The commissary had a dairy where they had their own herd of dairy cattle. At one time, they had a coconut farm.
The chief engineer inspects the length of the canal every day.
His daily schedule was extraordinary. He would go out on the Yellow Peril, which was sort of an old-fashioned tin Lizzie, but made of steel. And he would go up and down the rails and drop off at any point along the route to check on what was happening, who was doing what. He would talk to the laborers, he would talk to the foreman, he would talk to the assistant division engineer, whoever happened to be around. If there were any problems, any complaints, he said, write it down, send it to me, and he would move on.
Goethals' predecessors had overcome many obstacles: disease, disorganization, and a poor transportation system. But most of the actual digging remains to be done. About 220 million cubic yards of it. To keep his workforce and Congress updated and enthused, Goethals starts a weekly newsletter, The Canal Record. As well as social tidbits, it contains reports from all working divisions, creating a rivalry among steam shovel and dredging crews to see who could dig the most.
The other one said, I can move more than you can, and the other one says, no, you can't, and away they went. They, of course, had to get the cooperation of the people on the dumps, the people that were running the dirt trains, to keep them supplied with empty cars and so forth. It was not just the man that was sitting there operating the shovel alone. All of those people were involved in it. And it gave them a lot of pleasure, a lot of pride to be doing that as opposed to just plodding along, making your daily measure, so to speak.
Every steam shoveler on the job thinks his machine is better than any other man's. And away we went, like a pack of idiots, trying to get records for ourselves. There never was such steam shovel work in the world.
The canal authorities are determined to keep their dedicated workforce. They advance passage money to foreign workers, provide free living quarters, and promise work as long as construction continues.
They work with a good heart. You work six weeks. You have a rest house. You rest 7 days with pay. But the man was glad to get that work.
By 1912, there are more than 40 nationalities working in the canal zone.
They had all kinds of laborers. Turks, Greeks, Spanish, and Jamaicans. It was a tough-looking gang, and sometimes we had to call on the zone police to bust a few heads.
These men had to cope, the Europeans, with something new for them. It was a tropical country. They weren't used to it. Most of them came from cold regions. And, well, they tried their best to hold on.
Goethals also makes sure everyone lives comfortably, within a strictly enforced hierarchy of salaries and fringe benefits. Segregation on the Isthmus is as prevalent as in the American Deep South. Canal employees are divided into two classes, gold and silver.
Caste lines are sharply drawn, as in India. Every rank and shade of man has a different salary, and exactly in accordance with the salary is he housed, furnished, and treated, down to the last item.
The gold men are office workers and engineers who are paid in gold coin. The silver men are all unskilled laborers who are paid in Panamanian silver worth about half the face value of gold.
The man gets inside and turns left. In 4 steps, he's in front of the pay window. The paymaster says, "Show me your number." "Okay, hold your hat." And with a wooden pusher, he shoved a little pile of gold or silver coins across the counter.
White Americans live in furnished quarters with modern plumbing. They are the only employees whose houses are fitted with mosquito screens. Unmarried European and black laborers live in barracks, each sleeping 72 men. Black families choose between barracks or shacks in derelict villages.
They had to segregate them. They had camps for the West Indians, camps for the Europeans, and some of them lived in railroad cars, and others had tents. They were never together. They kept them apart as much as they could because they wanted to avoid any type of racial problems between them.
The West Indians are hardworking and deeply committed to the canal, despite the poor living conditions.
They will all get together. They will play card games. They will play domino. You know, they try to entertain themselves. Real nice. You say you never find much people drinking and drunk and things.
For white Americans, amusements are just like those back home. Pool at the YMCA, concerts put on by social clubs, and sports of all kinds, including baseball.
It was a lively, snappy game with plenty of hitting, some sharp fielding, and many exciting phases. Culebra won 4-3 to the frantic joy of the partisans of that club and the mighty gloom of the Empire people.
Despite the inequities, there's remarkable fellowship on the job, across the lines of color and position.
Our lunch mostly in those days were bread, sardines, and ice cream. It was refreshing. We worked hard, but cheerful. I can assure you, our boss never had any worries. He only said what he wanted, and it was done.
At the height of construction, the U.S. employs more than 44,000 people in Panama. 6,000 are gold roll white Americans. The silver roll comprises 4,000 European laborers and 34,000 West Indians, mostly from Barbados and Jamaica. All gold workers who serve 2 years under the Canal Commission are entitled to a medal, courtesy of President Roosevelt.
I shall see if it is not possible to provide for some little memorial, some mark, some badge, which will always distinguish the man who, for a certain space of time, has done his work well on the isthmus. Just as the button of the Grand Army distinguishes the man who did his work well in the Civil War.
Panama Canal is sponsored in part by Vario. The new world of business starts here.
Once they roamed the seas and explored the skies. But today, they're on the net. They are pioneers discovering a new world of e-commerce, of high-speed internet access. That's where Vario comes in. For we are the pioneers of the internet, the hosts of the new world, the leader in websites with state-of-the-art connections and a Tier 1 backbone for everything you need from the net. Vario, the new world of business.
Zima.
Cool. Zima.
Every year in Avon, Colorado, there's Bob Fest, a celebration of Bobdom, held at a bridge named Bob. Now, how do you capture an event of such magnitude? With the Pentax IQ Zoom 160. It's compact and simple, like the name Bob. It's got autofocus, auto flash, switches to panoramic, and it can zoom to 160 millimeters. One of the longest power zooms of any 35 millimeter compact camera. It's the Pentax IQ Zoom 160.
But you can call it Bob.
Aren't your pictures worth a Pentax?
You have to dig deep to find the source of Intrepid's solid feel. Reinforced door openings, strategically placed steel beams, and an isolated suspension cradle all contribute to Intrepid's supple ride. Take away that sturdy foundation and you have, well, nothing. Dodge Intrepid. We're changing everything. Again. Well equipped. $20,495.
Go behind the scenes into the FBI's ultra-secret crime lab as actual agents explain the techniques and tricks used to capture some of the most elusive killers ever. The FBI Files, coming up next on the Discovery Channel. Explore your world.
In prehistoric times, horses were about the size of your average household dog. Yeah, I'm afraid rodeos weren't very exciting back then.
Looking for horse fact, not fiction? Hey, get the real deal. Watch The Ultimate Guide Horses. It's an up-close look that proves fact is more amazing than fiction.
And that's why horseshoes don't come with heels. However, one archaeologist has uncovered evidence of horse sandals in ancient Rome.
Hey, be the ultimate expert. Watch The Ultimate Guide Horses. Premiering Monday at 10 Mountain, 9 Pacific on the Discovery Channel.
TCI Media Services wants to send you home for the holidays. Our grand prize winner and guests can visit family and friends or have them visit you. You could win 2 round-trip airfares within the continental United States, deluxe hotel accommodations, and rental car. Make this a very special holiday season and register to win the Home for the Holidays sweepstakes. Brought to you by TCI Cable and these fine sponsors.
Enter to win at George Thompson's Your Friend in the Diamond Business or Ojai Village Pharmacy.
Hello, welcome to Harbor Chrysler Plymouth in Ventura, where everybody's going ape over the wild holiday specials. Even Santa's checking these out.
Like this 1999 Plymouth Neon, only $93.88, or this '98 Plymouth Voyager, only $14,888. Or this 98 Chrysler Sebring JX convertible, only $17,988. How about this 99 Chrysler Concorde LX, only $19,988. Holiday wishes really do come true at Harbor Chrysler Plymouth in Ventura.
The toughest job the canal workers face stretches through the 9 imposing miles of the Culebra Cut. It requires slicing a massive channel through solid rock, 300 feet wide, 350 feet deep. The rock and dirt to be taken from Culebra Cut alone would make a pyramid 900 feet tall. The struggle to beat the cut would last 7 years, from 1907 to 1913. The French had excavated 20 million cubic yards from the site, and before the canal is finished, the Americans would dig out 5 times more. Work on the enormous site attracts visitors by the thousands. The Canal Commission arranges special trains and hires tour guides to escort the crowds who come to view the spectacle.
He who did not see the Culebra Cut during the mighty work of excavation missed one of the great spectacles of all ages. From its crest on a working day, you look down upon a mighty rift in the Earth's crust, at the base of which pygmy engines and ant-like forms were rushing to and fro without seeming plan or reason.
The once peaceful canyon is a deafening inferno. Crews are digging, dredging, and blasting 24 hours a day. Steam shovels in the cut are breaking records right and left. In March of 1909, 68 shovels dig 2 million cubic yards, 10 times the volume achieved by the French in their best month. Much of the earth from the Culebra Cut is reused to build the 1.5-mile-long dam at Gatun, which will block the Chagres River. The digging continues, but in 1909, crews also began working on the single most impressive engineering feat of the entire enterprise, the locks. They will be the largest concrete structures ever created, requiring 4 years and 2 million cubic yards of concrete to complete. To build the locks on the Atlantic side, spectacular cableways carry enormous buckets of concrete, holding nearly 6 tons each. On the Pacific side, huge traveling cranes carry the loads. After it is mixed, lifted, and carried, the concrete is poured into molds, all in a perfectly timed mechanical dance. The lock walls will be 1,000 feet long and higher than a 6-story building. They will form chambers nearly twice as large as those designed by Eiffel for the French.
The Frenchmen were thinking on a much smaller plan than we. And we got up to the point where I think they were thinking about a 90-foot wide chamber. And this caused a stir from the Navy. They said, well, we might have ships right now that will fit through there, but we have ships on the drawing board that won't fit through there, or they may have them in the future. And so they wrangled back and forth, and eventually they settled on 110 feet wide by 1,000 feet long.
Back in Culebra Cut, workers are attacking the land with the most hazardous but effective of weapons, dynamite. Up to 26 pounds of it are blown up at once.
This work was rough and dirty, and we had to rush to drill holes for dynamiting and blasting up big rocks so that the steam shovels could load them in the trucks.
Year after year, hundreds of men are killed or seriously injured. Dynamite that explodes prematurely is the most common cause of death. At the bottom of Culebra Cut, temperatures sometimes reach 120 degrees Fahrenheit. If the explosives sit too long in such heat, they could go off without warning.
There was a terrible accident a few days ago. A blast was about 2/3 in when one of the holes exploded prematurely. 39 dead are known, with probably 10 or 15 more still to be found.
In the night when you hear whistle, when it's gray, pop, pop, somebody gets hurt. And when you hear about, somebody gets killed. Yeah.
The recurring nightmare of Panama's unstable geology is only getting worse as Culebra Cut deepens. Builders are forced to angle the banks of the cut more and more to prevent slides. But the incessant rainfall creates glaciers of mud that flow mercilessly back into the just excavated trench.
I remember in times back when my stepfather used to tell me about the way how it was in the cut, the time of the rains, and how they'd come and take them out of the barracks, wherever they were, and push them out to work anyway. Tell them that they have to work because they need to move a slide, or when a slide came down and there were men under it, and they had to shovel these men because they were pick and shovel people. They had to shovel to take them out.
Cucaracha is the name of the old slide that had given the French the most trouble. In 1907, it comes back to haunt the Americans, beginning a cycle of mudslides that will add 25 million cubic yards to the digging, 1/4 of the total excavation in the cut. In 1912, more than 1/3 of the year is spent removing slides. Still, work continues. After a particularly bad slide demolishes tracks and machinery in January of 1913, Gothel's only comment is, "Hell, dig it out again." By now, Gothel's has created a workforce that is inspired, loyal, and intensely proud of the emerging canal. Victory is just around the corner.
Panama Canal is sponsored in part by Lexus, who knew driving a Lexus could feel so exhilarating.
The Lexus RX 300. Motor Trend Sport Utility of the Year. Fluid. Over any surface.
Archaeology, beaches, colonial sites, diving, eating, fiesta, good hotel, jungle, from A to Z, you name it, we've got it. Give us a call, 1-800-44-MEXICO. For every reason, any season.
At the center of a great PC experience is a Pentium 2 processor.
Okay, people, this is a phone, and this is a dollar. You still with me? Well, that's good. Now dial this number, and all your long-distance calls from home could cost less than $1. That's right, with 10-10-220, all calls up to 20 minutes are only 99 cents. Talk longer, and it's just 10 cents for each extra minute. No fees, no contracts. Am I right, Poochie? Just dial 10-10-220, then 1, then the number. Bottom line, you get up to 20 minutes on this for less than this. You got that? Good, because if I'm not mistaken, I think nature's calling my dog.
At BASF, we don't make the sunscreen, we make it stronger. We don't make the tennis shoes, we make them grip better. We don't make the jacket, we make it brighter. We don't make the carpet, we make it tougher. At BASF, we don't make a lot of the products you buy, we make a lot of the products you buy better. BASF.
I'm going to see him again over the holidays. There's something about the season, I just can't keep my hands off him.
Introducing Mr. Metal, the only metal polish that cleans all metal instantly.
Mr. Metal, he's your man.
You loved it, so tomorrow the Discovery Channel's got more of it. We're gonna get your adrenaline pumping. We're gonna get you a ticket, take you through the turnstile, strap you into a seat, and send you on the ride of your life. So fly higher, spin faster, cruise farther, and scream louder than ever before. Thrill seekers, this one's just for you. Wild Rides 2, tomorrow at 10 Mountain, 9 Pacific, only on the Discovery Channel. Explore your world.
What a great ride.
Explore your world.
Daytime.
They've got the scoop on everything.
With interior decorating, recreation ideas,
Health tips, hobbies, home repair.
gourmet food.
See for yourself.
It's not one thing. It's everything.
Where do I start? Daytime on the Discovery Channel.
The Chagres River, once a raging current, is arrested midstream. Gatun Dam, still under construction, begins to transform the Chagres into the calm waters of Gatun Lake, flooding 164 square miles of jungle. The lake will be 23 miles long, forming half the length of the canal and providing the water for the locks. The old enemy, the Chagres, has become an ally. The Panama Canal will raise ships higher than any lock canal before it, and yet it is so cleverly designed that gravity alone will control the 26 million gallons of water required to raise each ship. The water will pour into the lock through main culverts in the walls and cross culverts in the floor. It will flow into the locks from the lakes above or out into the sea level channels. It will take only 15 minutes to fill and empty each chamber. Gigantic steel gates will divide each lock chamber. At 7 feet thick and 7 tons each, they will be the largest ever built. The gate design is ingenious. The double doors are hollow, so that despite their weight, it will float when the locks are full of water. A contractor in the U.S. prefabricates the pieces and ships them down to Panama to be assembled. Gatun Dam will generate a newly harnessed source of energy, electricity, that will operate the Panama Canal. 1,500 electric motors will run the locks, with enough energy left over to light the canal zone. Finally, on May 20th, 1913, steam shovel 222 and 230 meet at the bottom of Culebra Cut. The digging is over. The last concrete is laid at the locks 10 days later. For thousands of men, the end of the most important work of their lives is fast approaching.
We have seen men grow down here, as well as concrete walls and mighty iron structures. They see how great the work of their hands has made them into men, whose like on earth is hardly to be found elsewhere. How they have fought the greatest battle of peace to a finish and stand now wondering somewhat how they did it.
In September, another milestone is reached. Culebra Cut is filled with water from Gatun Lake. There remains just one stretch of earth that prevents the canal from being continuous. When a temporary dike at Gamboa is blown up, the Culebra Cut is joined to Gatun Lake. A few days later, the first water enters Miraflores locks on the Pacific side. On August 15, 1914, the USS Ancon makes the first complete passage through the canal in 9 hours and 40 minutes. Transit through the waterway is officially open to the world. A dream of the ages has become a reality. The canal is finished, under budget, and ahead of schedule. So well planned was the fundamental design of the Panama Canal and the operation of its locks that for the next 85 years they remain unchanged. Since the canal opened, it has seen 700,000 vessels pass by. It has profoundly influenced the movement of people and the fortunes of the world. The Panama Canal has indeed united the globe, just as the Spanish, the French, and the Americans had wanted for 400 years. Although Theodore Roosevelt never saw the canal, his words echo in its completion.
Far better it is to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to take rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy much nor suffer much, because they live in the gray twilight that knows not victory or defeat.
Now go online and take an interactive tour of the canal as Discovery.com takes you there. Get more facts and learn the canal's true roots at Discovery.com. Coming up next, closing in on a killer, the kidnapper on the FBI files. Tonight, rebuilding the herd. Find out how Mother Nature puts it all back together on Wild Discovery. Then scientists and science fiction team up.